before we deep dive into the technology, I just wanted to talk about the technology radar itself. What is it and how do we navigate it? So let's dive into it. So hello everyone, I'm Sumedha and I'm a lead developer here at Thoughtworks and I'm from the Gurgaon office here. So before we jump right into it, that what is Tech Radar and what do all the rings and things like that mean, I'd like to have a quick poll. Lalit, if you can run that. It's just for me to know how, if someone in the audience have used or referred the Tech Radar, more like referred to Tech Radar before at some point of time. So can we have a quick poll, please? Okay. Lalit, can you start the poll? I'm sorry, unable to access that for some reason.
Can you see the poll result, Sumedha, now?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so we have a 50-50 mix here. So that's good. So people who have been through it before, it will be a revision for you, and people who have not, hopefully this would be informative to you as well. Cool. So let's start with the first question about what is the Thoughtworks technology radar, right? And a lot of times we refer to as Tech Radar, as you might have seen. So it started more than a decade ago as an experiment where we thought it would be interesting to put out these tech in a radar format and see how it happens. And it went really, really well. The industry received it very well. And that experiment basically was a success. And we realized this is an interesting thing that we can keep on doing. So we started doing that. And now we come up with the Tech Radar every 6 months, like twice in a year. So this is the 24th one that we are talking about. So what exactly goes into that? So it's a document where we are putting out changes that we think are interesting in the current landscape in the software development world, right? So anything in the software development aspect, anything that touches that, and we have come across it, we feel this is interesting and needs to be shared with a larger group, that's what goes into the Tech Radar. So one thing here, this is all based on our experiences across projects that are happening in different regions and our day-to-day work that is happening. So if we have come across a tech, if we have not come across a tech, for example, at all in any of our projects, it is very difficult that it might reach the Tech Radar. Somewhere across down the line, it has been used in some project or some project has researched on it. That's when it makes to the Tech Radar. And who's responsible for writing the final radar that you all see? It's Thoughtworks Technology Advisory Board, or in short called TAB. We at Thoughtworks are very like our acronyms a lot. So it's written finally by TAB. So it's a group of people and it keeps changing across the years and between Tech Radars as well. So that's the group that finally comes up with the Tech Radar that you might see on the Thoughtworks site. So what's the structure of the radar? Obviously, it is a radar and it was chosen because we want to show how the technology moves, because all the technology that we have come across or the tools that we use, they keep moving around. Like after some point, they are no longer usable, or there might be some new tool which is taking its place because of the features and all. So that's why a radar, because we can show the technology in motion on radar. And there are 3 basic components of the radar. First one is the Blips. And for each of them, I'll talk briefly upon it as we go along. The second is the Quadrants. And the third is the rings. So let's talk about each of them in brief, and then we'll see that how you can navigate the radar using these 3 components, right? So the first component is Blips. So any technology, any tool, any technique that you have come across that plays a role in software development, that's a blip. So it's just a terminology we have picked up from the radar game. Like wherever you're using radar, you'll come across blips. In our Tech Radar, it's a tool or a tech or a technique that can move around. So they're always in motion. They're always changing. In order to classify them and logically group them, that's where quadrants come into the picture. So the quadrants names are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll talk about them in brief. The first one is the languages and frameworks, any tech. That's, again, as I said, it's pretty self-explanatory. Any programming languages that you have come across, any frameworks that you have come across, we classify them in this quadrant. For example, it could be .NET. When .NET Core came out, it went into this quadrant, right? The second one is tools. So any kind of components, could be databases, could be any versioning tools, or any category of tools that, more generic category as well, that you might be using in your day-to-day software development, that goes into tools. Third is the platforms. Platforms, obviously, on top of which you are developing, that generally counts as a platform. For example, it could be some like a JVM, it could be a mobile tech like Android, Unity, all those become your platforms, as well as now, since everyone is mostly on cloud, a lot of services also go into the platforms category from the cloud, right? And the fourth one is the techniques. So something like which you might be using, it's not exactly a physical tool or something, but it's more of a concept. And that is also a blip, because that's related to our day-to-day software development, and that goes into techniques. For example, let's say mob programming, or it could be retrospectives, or it could be even something like microservices, which is a big umbrella term, but it's still a technique of how you can design your services, right? So all those kinds of blips go into techniques. So this is just a way to classify the blips, makes it easy to look up as well later on. So that's the role that quadrants play. And for example, if you're interested in one specific quadrant, you can just focus on that one itself. The most interesting part of this is the rings. And this is where a lot of time is spent while discussing where do we place the blip, because this plays a very major role in the whole Tech Radar ecosystem. So let's talk about the rings. The innermost ring is the adopt ring, and whichever blips or tools go here are those which are really proven out there and they're mature to use, and we have also used them a lot and we have had a great experience. And that is something that we definitely recommend that you should consider using in a particular context, of course. For example, it could be a particular context. All blips are useful in a particular context itself. So those are the blips that go in the adopt ring. So something, if you're putting something in adopt, from our side, we are saying that this is definitely, you should go for it and use it in this specific context. It's like a no-brainer. The second one, second ring is the trial ring. Now blips here, they are already in use. Even we have used in some of our production systems, but they're not completely proven, or maybe not as mature as the one in the adopt one. So we have started using in our production system, but you as a, let's say if you as a company or organization might want to think a little bit about or put them in trial before you actually go forward with it. So that's what goes into the trial. Then comes the SS. So anything that we feel is an interesting thing, we have researched upon them, and we feel it's good to keep an eye out for these blips. That's what goes in the SS ring. So if something that we have come across and we have researched for it may not necessarily used in production yet. So a lot of things that might go here are just research based and not yet used in production, but we feel they're interesting to watch out for. That goes into the SS ring. And the last but not the least at all is the hold ring. So this is something, the blips that go here is something that might be an industry standard, but we have not had good experience with it. So we want to warn everyone about as well, kind of put out a caution that if you're going to use that, just think a bit. Why? There could be multiple reasons. Maybe it's being misused. So there could be a tool or tech which is being misused. So we will call that out. Or we feel it's no longer usable. Could be because of vulnerabilities, for example, or something that we don't agree fits the context. So all of these reasons may lead a blips to hold. So one has to have very strong reasoning if we are putting something on hold, right? Because it's a big thing. So just quick review. These are the 4 rings: adopt, trial, SS, hold. As we move away from the center, the blips become more and more either less proven, and the final one is like hold. like caution before using it. And if it's nearer to the center, then go ahead and use it. So with all these things that we have in place, how do we navigate the tech radar? So this is a snapshot of a quadrant where I've just put one blip for ease. Otherwise, it would be filled of blips. And these are the rings that you can see in the adopt, trial, hold, assist. So any of the quadrants look like this. What I wanted to mention is how you can read it. So the blue dot that you see, the 14 number, that's a blip. And as you can see, it's in the trial ring. So this is something that we have had good experience with, but we still are not sure if it's a default choice, but it's a good choice for that context. And one thing that I would want to point out is if it's closer to the adopt ring. So within a ring, if a blip is closer to the next ring, it means that it is gearing towards adopt. So you might see the 14 blip in adopt in the next version. You might or might not see, or it may remain same. But the closeness of it with the adopt ring does matter. Similarly, if it's closer to the SS ring, that means it's still a little less mature than something that are closer to the adopt ring. And the legend that you see on the top that talks about it's new or moved in, because blips keep changing and they're always in motion. So there would be new tech coming in, of course, right? And some blips will be moving in and out of rings. So that's when that legend is used. And let's say the blip didn't change. If it was in adopt last year or in the last tech radar, it's still in adopt. So there's no change. So that's how you might want to navigate it. And the interesting part I want to call it, if you are starting just as looking up, I'll suggest you to start with the adopt ring, move on to trial, then hold. And the last one you want to look at is the SS. So if you are looking for something, then adopt and hold are the most important ones, and then trial and then SS, right? Okay, then how do you use it? Where do you use it? Where could it be beneficial? So I'll share my experiences where I've used it and found it very beneficial. Is obviously it kind of makes a great document for keeping up with the new tech. Why? Because you might be working in a specific project context, in a specific tech stack, and it's difficult to keep track of what's happening around. Now, this gives a very good view of what's happening across, because the input from here comes from various projects, various domains. So some projects are a research project, some projects are retail projects, some are data projects. So a lot of input comes from various kinds of projects. And this is a good way to kind of get a view of what's happening around each of these areas. So definitely a good place to keep up with the new tech. And it comes every 6 months, so it's not that slow. And second one, if I use it a lot, is while we are having tech discussions, or I have two choices and I want to see if there's something already made to the tech radar. So now when I'm taking decisions, or just I want to see how much value does that tool or tech hold, it becomes a good lookup as well. Like when did it appear? Let's say it was in adopt 3 years back. That means it's definitely a proven technology, right? Yeah, so these are the major ways, but if someone has more ways that they have used, because I've seen people have referred to tech radar before, feel free to share in the chat, because everyone would able to know about what could be the other ways of using tech radar. And if you are pinging on the chat, make sure to change the chat option to everyone so everyone can see that. So that's my most of the time I've used tech radar in this format, right? And that's all for this session. I won't keep you from the next interesting sessions where we actually take 2 topics from the radar this time and deep dive into it and have hands-on and all that. So not keeping it away, but there are a few links that I'll share in the chat as well. So there are a lot of other questions that you might have in mind that you want to look into. I'll obviously be here for answering those in the Q&A, but if I miss something or there's more, you can always go to the facts section of the tech radar. And you can also subscribe to the tech radar. So whenever a new tech radar comes, you'll be able to know about that. So I'll share these links in the chat, but that's all from my end. Over to you, Lalit. Thank you.